Shalom, everyone. Today, March 3rd, 2025, it's Parsha Tetzaveh. We're in the special time of the year with special parshiot. We're not going to discuss the special parshiot, although they would be valuable in and of themselves. This week would be Shabbat Zachor. Last week was Shabbat Shkalim. We had the unique phenomenon of three Sifrei Torah appearing in Shul, and that the trivia is when does that happen? It happens on two other occasions that I can think of. One is Simchas Torah, of course. You have three scrolls, which would be the scroll that ends the Torah, the scroll that begins the Torah, and the Maftir. Shabbat HaChodesh Rosh Chodesh, um, which would be you read the regular Parsha, and you read the passage that's HaChodesh, and you read the Maftir of Rosh Chodesh. There would be another one on Hanukkah, I think, right? It would be a Rosh Chodesh Hanukkah,
Right, Shabbat Rosh Chodesh Hanukkah.
Chodesh
Right.
Hanukkah. So it would be the regular Parsha, Rosh Chodesh, and the Hanukkah reading, and then the Shkalim, which we had also on Rosh Chodesh. So these are interesting phenomena for the synagogue Jew. Three Torahs, So the question I got this past week was, what if you don't have three Torahs? You make do. That's what you do. You make do with two, or you make do with one, and you just do a lot of wrong. The reason why we have many Torahs in an ark is precisely for this reason. That on any given Shabbat during the course of the year, you could read from different portions of the Torah, and of course that makes it convenient. The number of Torahs in a congregation obviously is a sign of honor and wealth, and so we have the spectacular arcs that you can see in different synagogues with many many Sefer Torah and many opportunities for their adornment. So that was this. So this week is Shabbat Zachor, which just briefly is about. It's the Shabbat before Purim, Zachor et asher asar lecha Amalek, the maftir from the book of Deuteronomy, that you should remember what Amalek did, becomes, I think, a very important Shabbat in the sense of both reminding ourselves of Amalek and Purim, but also I think it always has the valence, a doubly directed, one to the past and one to the present. Amalek being a symbolic exemplar of the evil of the most radical kind. And while one should be careful in terms of identifying any present enemy as Amalek, I think, from what we are seeing of the emerging hostages after, hundreds and hundreds of days of captivity, 500, 480 days of captivity, and how emaciated they are and how they've been subjected to such torture. Uh, we could be forgiven if we identify Hamas as pure evil. Um, and there is, of course, that case to be made for that and its eradication. So Purim and the story has its own valence this year. Um, I'm not going to talk about Purim, though. I'll talk about, we might get to it next week, but let's um, let's turn to Tetzaveh, which is a continuation of the discussion of what things are in the sanctuary. You recall last week I spent the lesson on what God shows you, and I thought that that was a valuable, um, excursus into, the process of, God showing you and vision, and I wrote about it in last week's Parsha sheet. This week, I want to talk about something that catches me right at the beginning of the Parsha, and it's part of the clothing that the priest wears. And there are two separate things that the priest wears that have the names of the people on them. And as usual, the Torah just tells us what the priest wears. It doesn't really describe why the priest wears it. So it's left to us to try and figure that out, if in fact we can figure it out. And part of the problem, I think, in this text, these texts in general, is, the symbolism is often lost on us, and then of course it becomes part of the creative energy of Jewish imagination to identify the symbolism and try to make a compelling case for what these things actually mean. So let's turn to the text and think through what these things could mean, and we'll see how and I have a few as usual. We're in a visual medium. We will look at some things visually as well. So here is the uh, so it tells us, and just I want to make sure that we can. It tells us we're on the. You see this text now. You have okay. Now, Vata hakrev elecha et Aharon achicha, which means now have come near to you, Aaron, your brother. Bet Banavito and his sons with him, mitoch bnei Israel lechahanoni, to be priests for me. Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Tamar bnei Aaron. This is Aaron's family. Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Tamar, the sons of Aaron. Okay, so we have their Aaron and his five sons. Okay, and just the political footnote is that the leadership of Israel is now Moses and Aaron. Moses, who has some function in the as an almost priest, but is not. Aaron will be the have the role as the priest for Israel, all of which is under, the broadest rubric, which is that the people needs to have its connection to God intact, and so they need the whole apparatus of the sanctuary and a priesthood. And what is interesting is also that there's going to be different parallels or relationships, that both answer other priesthoods that they are around. Religion is never something that it's a monologue. Religion is always in dialogue with other religions, with other cultures, and is like anything, any art or any form of human expression. It's always going to be something in religion that has within it earlier other religions, and there are other religions that are always going to borrow from our religion. We could see that certainly in Christianity from Judaism. The question is to what extent biblical Israel both repels and absorbs religious symbolism from the religions that are around it, namely Egypt and Mesopotamia. And that is a great question for scholarship. So here's Moses, and he's got to basically dress Aaron and his sons. V'asita bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha, you're to make garments of holiness for Aaron your brother, lichavod u'letifaret, for glory and for splendor. We had a whole lesson on those two words in the past. I enjoy that, lichavod u'letifaret. You're to make the garments. And so, Vata tedaber al kol chachmei lev, asher mileti v'ruach chachma, vasu et bigdei Aaron lekadsho l'chanoni. You are to speak to each who is wise of mind, whom I have filled with the spirit of the practical, wise that they make Aaron's garments to Halaman to be priests for me. I want to just stop on that verse for a second because it tells us that um, you know crafting clothing requires a certain set of skills and crafts altogether, manufacturing things, working with your hands requires a certain kind of ingenuity. Uh, from time to time, like everyone, I am enthralled by how things are made. Occasionally, if I look up in a YouTube thing, another thing will pop up in my YouTube feed about how something is built or how something is put together. Um, I'm always fascinated by that, and fascinated by the fact that I don't know how to do this at all. I don't have any capability in these things, and of course, one can learn certain things. I certainly have capability in putting a sentence together, to a certain extent. That's a craft on its own. Um, you know, we have different musical aptitudes. That's a craft. Some people are capable of taking, paint and making beautiful paintings. Um, and some people are just so adept at their skills. So here we are relying on a population in which in any number of any population there's always going to be people who excel at some things, and they are called Chachmei Lev, wise of mind, Asher Mileitav Ruach Chachma, who have the spirit of practical wisdom. And the spirit of practical wisdom, meaning that they know how to do stuff. They know not they know how to get stuff done. That's a different kind of wisdom, but they know how to work with their hands, and they know how to organize things. And they know how to use materials and um, and make something out of them. And to the rest of us who don't have this aptitude, their abilities are spellbinding. Okay, and they're to use those tools and talents to make these clothing. Ve'ela begadim, and these are the begadim. Asher yasu, choshen, a breastplate, ve'ephod, an ephod, whatever that is. It's something that is an envelope of some sort that holds something inside the breast piece. A tunic, me'il, uchtonet tashbetz, the braided coat, mitznefet, a wound turban, vavnet, a sash, vasubig de kodesh la'aron achicha ulevanav lecha onodi. So they're to make garments of holiness for Aaron your brother, and for his brothers to be priests to me. So, if we are attentive with our ears, we hear the word va'asu bigdei kodesh, and we immediately remind ourselves, vasu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, which is the title verse of the whole sanctuary. Vasu li mikdash, you shall make for me a mikdash v'shachant, that I dwell among them. Vasu bigdei kodesh, you shall make clothing that they're to wear to be priests for me. So already we are establishing here the zones of the sacred, namely a sacred space with sacred furnishings, and the zones, so to speak, of the things that people are to wear that defines them. Uh, and these are the several different kinds of garments that Aaron will wear as a high priest. Understanding, of course, that wearing clothing makes a real statement. Now, I don't want to get too contemporary. I'll just close here for a second, but I can't help but think of the most recent illustration of that in I'm going to leave adjectives off of this. The encounter between Donald Trump and Zelensky in the White House, um, which had clothing figuring as a central motif. Okay, and quite interestingly, Zelensky, who's been for the last 3 years, presenting himself, as the embattled leader, wearing basically fatigues as he, visits through different governments and palaces and different places, meeting with heads of state and making the statement, I think, that here I am, I'm the beleaguered leader, and I'm not going to present myself any other way than as the embattled leader leading my people in the most difficult war against a tyrannical foe, and so therefore I'm not going to take I'm not going to make any pretensions to be anything other than that, even if I am walking across the stages of the world in places of power like the Oval Office. Okay, so while most of us, I think, have gotten used to that in seeing Zelensky over the last couple of years, it at the beginning I remember thinking, wow, it's odd that he will do that, and it's making a statement. It's making a very important statement, I think. Um, and of course, it it's jarring in a sense. The whole reaction was a reaction that went way beyond just clothing. But you can see how clothing is essential to that. And while I don't want to get sidetracked into that, I think it offers us a very important illustration of that. The question is if there's ever another visit of Zelensky to the White House, will he be wearing a suit or not? And I think that of course makes it all the whole encounter uh, that much more whatever unfathomable. So what we're saying though is that the sacred zones require a certain kind of dress such that even to this day, if we are in a sacred space, we would expect um, a certain kind of clothing worn. I have to say, we're fairly uh, laid back in the synagogue. We don't have a quote, dress code. However, However, it is noted that when somebody walks in with torn pants or, um, a sweatshirt and slovenly looking, and doesn't pay attention to the fact that you're in a synagogue, you're in a place, you should at least give some respect to the place by wearing some clothing. I mean, we have different cultures around that, having just come from Israel a couple of weeks ago. So in Israel, of course, the cultural code in terms of what one wears into synagogue spaces is very different from what we have here. It's very informal, and the reason for that, I think, is historical, um, because it's both historical and it's also climate oriented. People are not going to wear heavy clothing, and people certainly in the early days of the state, they probably didn't have the enough. They didn't have the means to buy really expensive clothing. Maybe someone had only one suit. Maybe they had a suit. Many people didn't have a suit at all. And what constitutes formal wear in a more egalitarian context, the more proletarian context, where labor was important and where dressing up consisted of maybe if you had a white shirt and maybe it was a clean white shirt, okay, and that would be the epitome of dressing up was I wore a white shirt. A couple of years ago, I was with my kids on a Shabbat, and I wore, I think I did it kind of like to poke fun, but I wore my suit to shul, and it was a Friday night service. I wore a suit, and everybody turned their head and laughed at me my kids laughed at me, you know, because like, why are you like I was embarrassing them by wearing a suit, and they said, why are you wearing a suit? And I said, because I'm the rabbi, I have to wear a suit, you know, and it still is quite a diaspora thing to wear a suit. At my daughter's recent wedding, I made a point of keeping my suit and tie, my suit jacket and tie on the whole wedding. And because by about 30 minutes into it, I mean, people were stripped down to their t-shirts, never mind. So tremendous amount of informality um, in different cultural contexts. But in terms of the cultural context of the Seder, you're talking about, God. You're talking about wearing something before God. Okay. Any comments? Go ahead, Stanley. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love your analysis of this because I have felt this for some time that people have lost the sense of occasion and what dressing up means. It is significant, just as you said. And I think back to the shul I grew up in, just to give you a
Yeah,
contrast. You're probably familiar. This
sure.
was Spanish and Portuguese shul in
Portuguese.
Montreal and the Shara Shemayim, where the
Yeah.
people on the bima, the machers, so to speak,
Yeah.
wore top hats not
Puppets,
just
tails.
on Simchas Torah, but on every Shabbat. And you had a sense this was, a special place and you dressed in a special way. So I am somewhat taken aback when I see people dress in a very casual way for
Sure.
occasions like shul, the Metropolitan Opera,
Right.
concerts, and so on. So I just appreciate your analysis of this.
So funny. Yeah.
Oh,
Ilana, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
well, that's it.
Uh, I think we have to be a little practical. Who is gonna make all these clothing with the stones and all the decorations over those clothing? I mean, I think it requires factories
So
or
yeah, so
how it's
exactly.
gonna be done.
It requires a certain level of skill that is, I think, that only a few people possess, only people who have that skill. Not everyone possesses that skill, and that's why I think there's the text itself draws attention to turning to Chacham Lehi. I want to give you just one more example of clothing. So I didn't watch the Academy Awards. Of course, part of the Academy Awards is watching what everybody's wearing, and it is a very much a fashion event. Again, when you compare cultural context, Israel has the Ophir Awards. Its annual academy. It basically is every country or every has an academy of that's the it's the equivalent. And when you have, the award show, it's it it's completely people wear jeans, people wear, and in a sense, people are not. I mean, the only people that are wearing anything like a suit, or maybe the MC, they're kind of dressed up, but the 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 regular performers, the actors, the directors, the producers, they're not wearing anything because it's a very informal society, and they're kind of making their statement saying that we're still very much part of the people. We don't put on this show. We're not pretentious in this way. In fact, it's all the other. It's way to the other side, which is we're going to dress as informally as possible. So there is something to be said, in terms of the tension, for something that is sacred and something that's ceremonial, it does require a certain kind of attention from what you wear. And so here's what I want to draw attention to. So they're to take gold, blue, violet, purple, scarlet, byssus, make a phod of gold, blue, violet, suetai phod, whatever that is. And here we go. Shte chtefot chovrot yellow el shnei ktsotav v'chubar. Two shoulder pieces joined, it is to have, at its two ends, and it is to be joined. The cheshev afudato, the design band of its ephod, which is on it, kimaaseu mimenu yiyeh, zahav, tchelet, vargaman, according to its making, is to be itself of gold, blue violet, purple, worm scarlet, and twisted linen, right? Twisted byssus. Vilakachta et shtei avnei shoham. You are to take two avnei shoham, and here you'll see different translations of shoham, one as onyx and one as carnelian. I'll talk about that in a second. Ufitachta alehem, you are to engrave on them Shemot b'nei Israel. I want to just stop on this one for a second because this is what draws my attention. That the high priest has basically a shoulder stones, and there are two shoulder stones, and they're made out of they're a precious stone, an onyx carnelian stone, and they are to be engraved on them the names of the children of Israel. Shisha mishmotam ala even ha'echat, ve'et shmot hashisha notarim ala even hashenit ketoldotam. They are to have six of their names on the stone, one stone, and six of the six remaining, and the names of the six remaining ones on the second, so corresponding to their begettings. In other words, it should be according to the birth order, depending on how that works out. And that's going to be a very interesting question. Okay? Of the stone cutters making with seal engraved the two stones with the names of the children of Israel, surrounded by braids of gold, you are to make them. You are to place the two stones on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones of reminder of Zikaron, the Bnei Yisrael, for the children of Israel. V'nasa Aaron et shmotam lifnei Adonai al shtei ktefav lezikaron. And Aaron is to bear the names before the presence of God on his two shoulders for remembrance. Okay, that's what the text is telling us. And of course, the text being the text, does not present a diagram for us. The same way it doesn't present a map, it doesn't present, charts for us. We are so accustomed, in terms of information to translate literary information into visual with visual instruments, charts, graphs, maps, and pictures. But the text is a text, and the text has to convey to us in the best way possible something that we have to imagine. And when it's imagined, it gets produced, and when it gets produced, it then gets witnessed, and then from the witnessing of its production, it will then transmit itself into an oral tradition, and that will itself enable it to be replicated over the generations. Not that these were, but how this is made becomes the tradition, and so I mean, not that we want to go in this direction, but there are, don't be surprised, pockets of Jews in the world who are deeply, deeply concerned about this and want to know how to make these things based on the way that they're described in the text. And of course, I have plenty of books that show different kinds of ways that these are fabricated, and each one is going to show something quite different. And you can spend a lot of time looking on the internet and seeing different creations of this. In fact, why don't we do that right now? I'm going to show you, from not an unlikely source. It's very interesting that Christian sources tend to do this a little more than we do. So let's just take a second.
The girdle of the ephod which is upon it shall be of the same, according to the work thereof, even of gold, of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen. And thou shalt take two onyx stones and grave on them the name.
Okay, so I have to say there are two things that bother me here. One is that the engraver is using, something that is like a modern engraving tool, right? And the second thing, for those of us who know just a little bit about the evolution of the Hebrew language, is that they're using not the Paleo Hebrew script, but they're using the Assyrian Hebrew script. That we've talked about it in the past, that Hebrew, the letters, the way that the Hebrew language appears to us today is not what it was in antiquity. Next time you visit, Israel, and you go to the Israel Museum and you go to the Shrine of the Book, you'll see plenty of examples of this, where ancient Hebrew texts, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are some examples of fragments of scrolls that are written in the what's called the Paleo Hebrew script, and that it wasn't until after the destruction of the first temple and the exile of the Jews to Assyria that the Jews adapted basically the script of the ancient world that was in Babylon and Assyria, and they brought it back with them. And that is why all of the texts are written in this script here, the square script. Um, it wasn't always that way. I remember one of the most interesting exercises that I had to do as a graduate student was to try and create, the recreate the evolution of a biblical script all the way from, a Paleo Hebrew, its prior Hebrew, ancient presentation, to the way it appears in a scroll today. And so we had to learn the Paleo Hebrew alphabet, not too difficult, and write out the script, write out the verse in Paleo Hebrew, and show how the verse would have evolved, because the addition of consonants and vowels, etc. Forget the dots, but a letter hey, a letter yud, a letter vav. These, there are certain conventions that emerged over time, and so the way that the text, we have the text today is, let's just say, without being too uh, controversial, it's not the same. Okay, so when this fellow here is taking a power tool and engraving what looks like a sheet of some onyx here, that's you know it's not really authentic at all. Okay, so this is what he's doing. Let's go. We'll look some more.
Of the children of Israel. 6 of their names on one stone, and the other 6 names of the rest on the.
Okay, so they're making it look to be Paleo or ancient, but it's not. And this is, so you have nice, it's beautiful, black onyx and the engraved names. And you see on the right side, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Gad, Naphtali, sorry, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Yissachar, Zvulun, uh, Yosef, and Benjamin. Okay, they're trying to make it look Paleo. It kind of does, but not really. Okay, and
On
go
the other
ahead.
stone, according to their birth. With the work of an engraver in stone, like the engravings of a signet, shalt thou engrave the 2 stones with the names of the children of Israel. Thou shalt make them to be set in ouches of gold. And thou shalt put the 2 stones upon the shoulders of the ephod for stones of memorial unto the children of Israel. And Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord upon his 2 shoulders for a memorial.
Okay, so let's take a look at this now, and uh, this is, as as good as any uh, attempt to reproduce what this looks like. And what the question I'm asking as I read the text and as I see the image like this is, so what's this about? What's going on here? And I have to say, I was inspired by this for in a comment that I read, um, saying that it's interesting how the names are configured for the shoulders, and the names are configured on the breastplate, which sits on the heart and on the stomach. Okay, so the observation is that the names are in 2 clusters. Okay, and then on the breastplate and on the stomach, they're in their individual names. Okay, so now shoulders and heart. what this is the attempt at the symbolism. The attempt at the symbolism is to say the people are brought before God, and they're brought in two different ways. In one way, they're brought on the shoulders. I mean, does God really need the names of the people? No. And another way, they're brought on the chest. In one, they're together as a collective, and the other, they're individuals. So I think there's a little insight here, which is that we appear before God essentially in two different ways. One, as part of our collective, and two, I mean, here we're part of tribes, okay, but you can extend that to our individuality. It's almost like saying, you know, we are we are who live in America, and of course, if you live in Canada too, in different, federal countries, that is to say, countries that have provinces or states in which each state has its own identity and its own flag, and yet there's a collective. And so, part of the tension then that exists on the person of the Kohen Gadol is the tension between representing the collective people and representing each individual tribe. Okay? And I think that's it's a remarkably, nuanced insight that plays itself out in different kinds of societies and in different kinds of situations, right? We have, states and we have the federal government, we have provinces and the federal government. Each province has its own legislature and identity and flag, etc. Each state has its own constitution, its own flag, its own symbol, its own bird, its own da 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 da. And certainly the dynamic in this country is you have federal law, you have state law, you have controversial questions that are answered by one state in one way and they're answered by another state in another way, and create a certain kind of friction, but also cohesion and the attempt at harmony. And that is what's going on here also in the Urim V'Tumim, the representation of each tribe with its own tribal identity, yet coming under the collective. Ruth, go ahead. Unmute.
Maybe it's also the way things are carried. Okay, the shoulders represent, okay, you carry things on your shoulders. So the carrying the people on your shoulders, the weight of the people, and on the choshen, that would be carrying them in your heart. So it's both the physical burden and the spiritual burden of carrying the people.
Absolutely. Very good. So it's interesting that we can break it down like collective and individual, but it's also, these are different kinds of leadership and different kinds we would tend to use the term burden, that the person, we think of the shoulders as the place of burden, okay? But if you put that aside, if you put the word burden aside and say, like, I have it on me this way and I have it on me this way, so I am attentive to every individual with my heart, and I'm attentive to the collective, leadership, the responsibility that I have as an entire group. Of course, does that mean that you're not attentive to the collective, with your heart? Even though these are, we're using very symbolic, language here in that sense. Yes. Okay. So we see that in. Go ahead, Skip. Yeah.
But we can think of it in the other way, from the bottom up as opposed to top down. That if you look at it as the strength, the overall strength comes from the shoulders. But the overall strength going into the shoulders is the collective coming up,
Absolutely.
not
Right.
the other way down.
Right. I look, that's the beauty of symbols that don't have one meaning, right? They make it available to us to create other meaning. So here I'm going to digress. I mentioned before that the stone you saw that in the video. It was a black onyx that they were using with uh, an engraving. Okay, but the one of the scholars that I like to consult on these things, this is William Prop, Book of Exodus, the Anchor Bible. So he translates Shoham as carnelian. And I just happen to have this book here. I have to keep it on my desk because I like this, and I like my own little collection of minerals, and I'm interested in it. This is a carnelian, by the way. This red rock is a carnelian. Okay. Now, uh, I don't go for the what does it mean? Although it's very interesting what it how there are people that are really devoted to the meaning of thing. I find rocks and minerals fascinating. Also, on my last trip to Israel, I stopped by a store. I got this. You can recognize this, Ilana. What is this?
I can see.
Can you see what color it is?
Green.
Green.
It's green turquoise. And what part of southern Israel would it be from that starts with A or E?
Eilat?
Eilat.
No.
This is Eilat stone. It's Eilat
Oh,
stone.
Even Eilat.
Even
Oh,
Eilat. It's
Even
not a
Eilat.
good example, but it was very, very popular in Israeli jewelry, back in the 50s and 60s. And the reason for that is because it was quite plentiful and easily polished, and quite beautiful, actually, green, stone. And so, we see still some examples of it. It comes back. There's these things come in and out of style. So here is carnelian, and on my little card, this is what it looks like, in the raw state. Carnelian. Sorry, this is what it looks like. That's not it. This is what it looks like. That was a gate. This is what it looks like. Okay. So what is it? And on the back, it tells me what it says here. I'll read it to you. What it is, a cherry red chalcedony used by ancient Romans in signet rings. Wax doesn't stick to it. And by modern folk to ward off insecurities. Carnelian's fiery energy helps spin us out of fearful thought cycles and into action. Who needs it? The understimulated. Anybody looking to get acquainted with their fears. Okay. Where to put it? Wherever you want to inject some passion and confidence. When to use it? When you find your creativity on sleep mode. Okay. So carnelian is for those people who are interested in the power of minerals and gems. It drives you up, including your creative drives, and of course other drives as well. Uh, I
Uh,
don't.
I also have Even Eilat,
There you go. Good for you. Okay.
and it says Mazal
Oh, very
over
nice.
it. And I have more. I have more. I have more.
Look at you.
All
That's
kinds of
Oh,
them.
that's
that's a
pretty.
that's a nice labradorite or whatever. Okay. So in this book, it's more chemical. So it says it's a silicate, silicon dioxide. It's a subgroup of quartz. It's very hard. Okay. But here is why uh, I I think it's not onyx, and I think it's carnelian, and that has to do with geography, because carnelian is found in Egypt, India, China, and Brazil. Also Scotland, Germany, Japan, and Colombia. Okay. Onyx is not found there. I lost my thing for onyx, but I think it was on page 102 here. Uh, no. Onyx is found in the more in the Western world. Okay, so where would they have? What they wouldn't have gotten stones imported from other places other than what's around them. They would have used carnelian. So now I'm into like, okay, very interesting. So on the one hand, you have all sorts of, you know, uh, things associated with minerals and stones, which I think goes back quite, this is not a new fascination. These things, have deep, deep roots in the way that cultures related to precious gems and stones, and they had all sorts of association with them. But there's one interesting thing about this. What's interesting about this carnelian? It's red. It's a reddish stone, okay? And that to me seems like to be the most obvious thing. And what would it be? The obvious
Reminds
thing
me of the
is
desert.
is what?
Reminds me of the desert.
Reminds you of the desert, okay? Well, it reminds me of something else, okay?
Blood.
It's blood. Blood is life, okay? Now, interestingly enough, the priest is around animals all the time, slaughtering, pouring blood, etc. Okay. And, there's no refrigeration. There's no, I mean, I don't want to get too, gross about it, but if you're, if in your imaginative world is structured around life, okay, and the, the symbolism that God gives life and that blood is a divine gift that flows within every living thing, and that you are going to use that as the quote unquote detergent, that is to say, the thing that will purify you, that you will want to have some kind of visual symbolism of that always representing you to God. So here, can't find this anywhere, and I'm sure I'll get criticized for it if I ever said this in shul, which I will. But the point is that we're the living people, and we're the people that, and we're not that every people's living people. We're at the core of our existence is the affirmation of God as a God of life and God living God, and that is symbolized through blood, and that is symbolized through blood as the purifying agent, such that that you recall that when we create purifying rituals, the red heifer, this is the animal with its kind of rusty brown, it's completely rust colored as an animal, and you take the animal, you burn the animal, and you burn it together with cedar and hyssop, things that are red, and you get the highly, highly, highly concentrated redness that then is diluted into quantities, I don't know what the dilution mixture is, so that you get a water that then becomes the purifying water, okay, that you sprinkle on it. And so why is that the purifying water? Because it's got the symbolism of life. So here's my point. My point is that the Kohen Gadol is walking around with two shoulders. They're not black onyx, they're red carnelian. They're representing the people in the way that we spoke about, that it is both bottom up and top down, okay, that he's possessing the burdens of Israel as a collective, and he's zikaron, he's reminding God all the time that the people which are engraved on the shoulder of the Kohen Gadol, that the Kohen Gadol is representing the people, and this is the living God, and that God should be coming down, as it were, to the people as the living force, the force for life in the people. Okay? So I'm going to pose that for everyone and see if you have any kind of reactions, or you think I'm just kind of I drank something this morning, which I didn't. I
It
did.
works.
It works. It works for you. Okay, good. All right. Let me just as a contrast here. So we showed the video. So we have this is the breastplate now with the verses about the Nasar on Shema Bnei Yisrael Bechoshen Mishpat Alibo. The names of the children show on the breastplate of judgment over his heart. Whenever he comes into the holy shrine for a reminder before the presence of God regularly, You are to put on the breast of the Urim Tumim. They may be over that whenever he comes before the presence of God. So Aaron is to bear the breastplates of judgment for the children of Israel over his heart before the presence of God. So you have essentially two things. One, which is the red, and I don't go into it. We've gone into it in the past. That the each name is associated with a different gemstone. Okay, and so I put the two verses here. The two passages parallel to each other to see. ונשא אהרון את שמותם לפני אדוני על שתי כתפיו, ונשא אהרון את שמות בני ישראל בכל על ליבו. So the names are on his shoulder, the name is on his heart, and both of them signify a reminder. Okay? So here, this is not a complicated idea. And it goes back to, you know, individuality and collective, or we would say, and it's kind of controversial to even use these words, but this is the diversity of the peoples represented, each having its own little gemstone on on the breastplate. That each tribe is entitled to its own unique character, its own unique, symbolism, its own unique heritage, its traditions, its culture, its private microcultures, and that is represented by a different kind of color. And one I could go through the deck of crystal cards and try and find all the different significances of each one of them, and that probably is an exercise in futility. It might be simple enough to say that the 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 gemstones represent wealth, they represent beauty, they represent differences, they represent the diversity of the people, that some, are one color, some are dark color, some are red, some are yellow, some are green, some are blue, etc. Who knows? And that the Kohen Gadol is walking before God as the ambassador to the people, and to God he is the ambassador to the people. He's the ambassador of God to the people. And that is born in the symbolism. Bob, I'm waiting for you.
I actually very, very much like what you're saying, particularly in that you are solving a conundrum about diversity, equity, and inclusion being part of this, as well as merit, excellence, and intelligence,
There you go.
bringing it together DEI and MEI, which everyone is fighting about now, because that's all symbolized in what you said. But I'll go further. I'm curious about what is the Kohen Gadol seeing? What are the other priests seeing? What are the people seeing? And it brings me back to Kurosawa's classic film, Rashomon, where a murder occurs and everybody looks at the scene and sees different things and explains it in different ways. It takes us back to the meeting in the Oval Office. This one saw it this way, this one saw it that way.
Sure.
So my question is, from a Rashomon perspective, the Rashomon effect in psychology, is the wearing of this for the Kohen Gadol to take what's on the inside and make sure it's also on the outside and the outside in? What are the people seeing and experiencing in terms of their feelings, their emotions, their thoughts? So two big questions.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure to what extent the people get to see this. And because the Kohen Gadol does not exit the sacred area in that garb. Um, So it's quite likely that the only people that get to see that are other Kohanim, and maybe the worshipers who are coming with their offerings. You know, I, I imagine that the Kohen has to function within the altar. It's there, but the we have plenty of sources that the Kohen will, especially like on Yom Kippur, for example, when he goes home, he has to take off his clothes. He leaves the precinct. So to the extent that people get to see him wearing this, I'm not sure. Uh, Maybe, and here it's going to strike us in terms of the non-egalitarian nature of biblical religion, that this is it's between God and the Kohen Gadol going on, and maybe the other Kohanim. That the Kohen, for example, wears bells, or ringlets, things that make a noise on his tunic, and why is that? Well, so quote unquote, God will hear when he enters the holy places. Well, that sounds ridiculous on some level. And because of course God can hear, but there's a deep anthropomorphism going on in 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 the rituals of the temple, and that aesthetic sense is you being expressed in this clothing, um, and let's put it right where it needs to be put, which is none of us will ever see this, okay? In reality, it's all in our imagination because of the text, and that's exactly how I think the text has a certain irony to it. You will never see this. I mean, I can show you videos left and right and center, and turn books, and we can go to Bezalel school and find the best artisans in the world who take the text and try and recreate it, and all of that is great activity and exercise, but it's all in our imagination. And so what then happens is we are imagining a dialogue in symbols between God and the priest, and in our own way, you know, we all become the Kohen Gadol. We all become part of the story, and we're all connected to these different elements. The same way that, you know, uh, a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the revelation at Sinai, and part of the revelation at Sinai is asking the question, well, Moses went up the mountain, Moses went down the mountain. There's the cloud that comes on the mountain, and he's inside the cloud. And at a certain point, like any piece of literature or art or movie or whatever, you're there with him. And you are meant to be there with him, and you're meant to go there inside the text, and you're meant to be with him on the mountain. And you're meant to be listening to God as God speaks. And you're meant to ask the question, which I asked at this go, which is, how would I respond to what is being shown here? It's when the text says Moses has to be there for 6 days, you know, there's part of me that goes like, I can't sit still for 6 minutes, let alone 6 hours, 6 days. How is Moses going to be there? And is Moses impatient? Does Moses want to be next to the people? And the same thing is true here, which is, I am reading about this, I'm imagining it, I'm seeing it, displayed by people who are trying to reproduce this, and I'm trying to ask your question, which is, so what is God seeing? So at the very least, God is seeing, I look at the top view, God is seeing collective people. And the front view is the people are seeing, their reflection to them. That it's on the heart says this is the most important part of this, which is we're all together as individuals in this representation to God, uh, before God. Is there a dialogue going on with other peoples? Absolutely, because in other religions, other priests wear whatever the equivalents of. You go look at the ancient Egypt, iconography, and you'll see that there's a dress and a clothing to it, and right up until today, military garb. People, wear the uniform, and on their chest are all their ribbons, or their medals. There's formal wear, there's A attire, B attire, etc. When do people wear that stuff? They're wearing it to convey a certain sense of identity and accomplishment as well. Okay. Any other? So I don't know if that answers it, but I'm sure that it comes close. Well, there we are. Okay, so well, that will conclude this excursus into mineralogy and symbolism. Uh, we look forward to a good week. Of course, we're thinking about all the challenges that are facing the Jewish people and Israel during these days, praying for the return of the hostages, the remaining ones, and hoping for hope that they will know their freedom soon. I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we'll
Are
see.
we in person tomorrow or
So
Zoom?
the class is in person tomorrow and online also. It's a little awkward that way, but I know that there are people that need to be elsewhere, either at close distance or at far distance, and we'll accommodate that as best we can. But it's focused for the gathering there, and I'll try and put up things that are online as well. Okay.
Uh,